I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, welcoming you to the Margaret River Winemaker special series. Across these 4 episodes, recorded in February 2023, we'll be exploring the modern Margaret River winemaker scene in the company of 4 respected producers, giving you the most up-to-date exploration of the region, available anywhere in podcast format. Make sure you're subscribed to be alerted when new episodes go live. We close out the Margaret River Winemaker series today in the company of Mark Warren of Happs Winery. We hear Mark's origin story before taking a deep dive into the culture at Happs. We discuss regional culture in the Margaret River region. We talk cellar door innovations, geological origins, the differences of vineyard sites in North and South Margaret River, and he looks ahead for the future development of the brand. Enjoy.
I've been making wine now for 34 years, 20 of which I've spent at Happs, actually. I was, out of high school, no idea what I wanted to do, went to uni with each year sort of seemed to change about what I wanted to do. And then I had the good fortune of my university job was waiting tables in a restaurant that was located at a winery. And I didn't have any connection with wine, but I had this real interest, and it just grew and grew over that sort of, university years, to the point when I finished uni and I did a double major in biochemistry and microbiology. And I was like, nah, this is not what I want to do. I want to go make wine. So I went to another university and studied winemaking. So it was kind of like a little twist of fate that was my university job and led me on this path. And I feel really lucky because after all these years, I still really enjoy what I do. And it's never looked back. So I spent 13 years in another wine region, and 20 years ago came to Margaret River. And basically, once you come to Margaret River, you never leave because it's a pretty amazing place to live and work.
Very cool. And where were you? Where were you making wine before Margaret River then?
So I was making wine in the Swan Valley, which is about half an hour out of Perth. So it's a warmer wine growing area, but really close to the capital city. So we're just time for a sea change, and came down to Margaret River, and it's the place to be.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking jealously at a lot of the pictures, and this is the 4th conversation from the Margaret River series as well. So I feel like I'm kind of virtually traveling around there. It sounds like a really beautiful place, as a lot of wine regions are, but equally sitting here as we are, like February 2023, it's also obviously a beautiful time of the year there as well. And we're kind of we're deep in winter here over in England, and you're loving it up in the sun, and I guess looking ahead to vintage 2023.
We do lose a couple of months of good weather when you're stuck in a winery, doing the hard yards, but we get to enjoy most of summer, so that's good.
I love it. So where, I guess the logical place, and you kind of taken us up to the door really of Happs, Mark, in the story. So maybe take us inside of Happs. Tell us about who are the key people there. And that would be the kind of the place to start. Who is the owner? Who is the team? What is Happs? Over that time, and how's it developed?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a really interesting place. It's quite quirky and has a lot of uniqueness about it. And there's some really important people who make significant contributions. But certainly the owner, Earl Happ, I mean, he's really important, both in terms of the tone of the business, the direction, the philosophy, and he's he's getting on a little bit, and he's releasing it over to a few other key people as well, but still actively involved. And as I say, over all these years, certainly set the tone. He's a deep thinker about wine, and he's also somebody who isn't necessarily happy to just follow trends and the path that other people take. He wants to kind of stand for something different, and he's quite happy to put it on the line and champion a bit of an unorthodox approach or out of the box thinking. So that makes it kind of a really fun place to work, because you can have quite left field discussions. So there's definitely, even today, a really strong contribution from Earl. Obviously, as winemaker and been here for 20 years, you like to think I'd have something to do with keeping things running nicely. But have a great team behind me as well, and that's both in the winery and our 2 vineyards. Great relationships with our vineyard managers and my assistant winemaker. She's absolutely critical. So it's a great team that takes the grapes and makes the wine. But then you've also got the sales and marketing aspect as well. And so we have Stacey, who heads up sales and marketing, Stacey Lewis, and it's great to have a relationship with her, because even though she's sales and marketing, she's actually a trained winemaker and worked as a winemaker who's just gone down a marketing path rather than a winemaking path. So from my point of view, you get to have these fabulous winemaker type discussions instead of, unrealistic, crazy marketing kind of discussions. So, collectively the whole team comes together, and I think we get on well and talk the same language. And so, it's really important how all of those pieces of the puzzle combine.
I love it. And I think, flowing kind of very nicely from, what I've said and, how the conversation is going. It would be to, I guess, understand maybe through, some examples, like, what the sort of culture is, both at the winery, but then also in that kind of wider Margaret River region. And I know that something that you mentioned in the kind of pre-work was an idea and I guess a philosophy really around encouraging visitation to the cellar door. And it sounds as though there's some interesting, unique things that you've got going on in that respect. So, could you give us, a little bit of a tour around that as a philosophy, really? As I say, we like to think about things a little bit differently, and I mean, culturally, I guess there's been some moments along the journey from when we started to where we are now, and I think there'll be more moments in the future as well. It's constantly sort of listening and seeing and evolving and thinking what's happening. I mean, if you went right back to the beginning of Happs and what inspired it, we're going back to a time when Margaret River didn't even have wineries. It's like hard for me to even think about Margaret River not having wineries. But if you go back 50 years ago, it wasn't the case. Margaret River was like a quiet little surf town. And then we have a really well-known scientist here in Western Australia, Dr. John Gladstone, and he did a whole lot of research and said, hey, I think Margaret River could grow world-class wine grapes. And what you might know about Happs is that when originally started the property, at least our northern property, Ros and Earl Happ, they were potters. They made pots, not wine. Which is quite funny. Earl's an excellent potter. We've actually got him on a project at the moment making amphora for us, because we've got this little sort of side wine project we want to do where we can make wine in our own amphora that we can make on site. So that's kind of how it started. And then John Gladstone said, should look at growing wine grapes. And Earl thought, I reckon if we made some wine, we might sell some more pots. So that was the beginning. And the wine business sort of
kind of blew up, and it's now obviously not so important, the pots, in terms of what the business is about, but we still have the pottery, and it's still really important to our cellar door. So whenever you come and visit, you can come and taste all the wines, but you can also come and check out the pottery that's been made here for since 1970s. So we still do that. So I think that was a really kind of important cultural moment. I guess there's been other things along the way. The original property, which is the one I'm sitting on now, which is in the north of Margaret River, and just to sort of set the tone, there's it's 120 kilometres long. So Margaret River is not just Margaret River; it's depending on where you're growing fruit in Margaret River. I think one day we'll really kind of understand the sort of sub-regions and the characters of the sub-regions, but we're a young region, so we're still trying to work that out. So Earl, he's a deep thinker, and he spent a lot of time researching climate, the climate that we have throughout Margaret River, but also the climate in the famous wine regions of the world, and that actually kind of drew him to thinking the south of Margaret River was going to be really important, and consequently, in the 90s, bought a property down in the very south of Margaret River and put in extensive new plantings. So that is something that we really do champion. We are a champion for what the south of Margaret River can do as well, because we think that the flavours and characters that you get from there are something interesting and worth promoting, and different from other parts of Margaret River. So that's kind of been something that's really driven the focus here. We also have a real love of alternative varieties or emerging varieties. And so when Earl planted this vineyard, he planted a lot of different grape varieties. So whenever in Margaret River was planting Chardonnay, Semsav Blanc and Cabernet, Earl was doing that too, of course, but amongst that we were planting Sangiovese and Nebbiolo and Tintacao and Muscadel and Marsanne and Mourvedre, and this range of varieties that haven't normally been associated with Margaret River. That was quite innovative, like back in the 90s, to do something like that was, I don't know, probably a little bit crazy, but we love a bit of crazy here. And I'm going to be really honest with you, when I made the move 20 years ago to come down here, that was a really big appeal for me, because, I was comfortable making Chardonnay and Shiraz and had success in that area, but I was excited about all these varieties, all these wines from places that, I really wanted to travel to. And Happs offered the palette to do that. So that was really, really important, and I think, really significant to how we roll. And then even now, because of all those varieties, so in our cellar door, we have, usually 40 or 45 wines up for tasting, which is a lot more than your normal cellar door. And I guess because we're in a really popular tourist region, we really do focus on visitation to our cellar door. It's so good to have people coming in. If they touch and feel the place, they will obviously go away connected to the brand and hopefully become supporters. So that's something that we really focus on. And our cellar door experience has evolved, and as I say, we love innovation. And so during the kind of crazy COVID times, we actually set up a outdoor help yourself tasting arrangement. So the idea was for a contactless tasting. So people were outside in the fresh air, could get themselves a wine sample, not actually have to have contact with anyone if they didn't want to. And the gardens here are absolutely beautiful. They're manicured by Earl's wife, Roz, and everyone loved it so much. We got such a good response that it became a sort of post-COVID, well, we need to stick with this and keep on developing it. So that's kind of what we do. And, everything we like to do is kind of trying to be a little bit left field, a little bit different, a little bit unique.
Yeah, I love it, and I love the variety that you've spoken about there. I just love the idea of having so many wines, 45 wines that are there, and can imagine for anybody, for either for giving people a way into wine, it's like I'm sure among the 45 you're going to find a wine that you like, if you're not necessarily a wine drinker. But then also for the people who are, fans of Margaret River, people that want to kind of taste different wines and, different influences and explore those different approaches to winemaking, then I'm sure that's also great for them as well. They can kind of geek out on sampling those 45 and really trying to understand the differences that the site and the winemaking then shows when it gets into the glass.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we'd really like to think that we can pretty much, offer a wine for everybody and every occasion. So we like that, and we sit down and talk about it and go, we make too many wines. Which ones do we get rid of? And it's like, no, I like that one, I like that one, and we're much more likely to introduce a new wine than we are to remove one. We actually really like what we're doing, and you get inspired and you see another style and you think, oh, we can do that, and there's a place for that in the range we hadn't thought of. And so, more often than not, we kind of add things in. But, and it's kind of nice, like, you make a wine and it sells out because you only have a small production of it and people are waiting and you move on to the next one. And, it creates a bit of, come and see, and hopefully I'll have the favourite there at the tasting.
Yeah, I love it. And I think the logical next place for me, and I guess where my curiosity is going, is to say, okay, now, I've got a visual around the 45 wines that are there, and, how people are kind of enjoying them at the tasting room. What about taking a step back, I guess, and kind of, giving us an idea of, and especially as we're, and you're, right on the verge of harvest there, talking to, I guess, the sites, the specific sites from where those grapes are coming from that go into those wines. So, a sense of, I guess, is it all kind of estate fruit? Are these all vineyards that you're kind of, you own and work? Is it kind of sourced fruit? And then, maybe going into a bit of an exploration of, I guess, one of the key sites that is owned by yourselves and is, as say, a source for those wine grapes.
Yeah. Look, I'll talk about the two vineyards, as I say, because we have a vineyard in the north and a vineyard in the south, and they're quite different. But, it's kind of, I guess for somebody who has never visited Margaret River, to paint that picture, it's a really interesting area. It's 120 kilometres long north to south, so it's quite a big region. And our western and southern boundary for the region is the West Australian coastline. So we have lots of beaches, beautiful beaches. So if you come and visit here, it's all about surf, diving, fishing, swimming. Absolutely beautiful place. And that's why no one ever leaves, actually. If you come here as a winemaker, it's like, right, you don't leave. But, we have, beautiful forests, and we have caves and walk trails, and, so it's a really, really pretty place to
sounds horrible
to live. Yeah. Especially, you're freezing cold over there probably, and we're sitting here going, how good is this? So, that's kind of the environment that Margaret River sits in. And I guess if I'm sort of talking about, how it looks when you come here, if I look out the window right now, we're sort of got a brilliant garden, rolling lawns, as I say, where we have our tasting area outside. If you're here during the day, people are drinking, sitting out on the lawns, eating, picnicking. We've got really nice views of Geograph Bay as well. Only glimpses, but it's a beautiful vista. So not only do we have the sort of west coast where we have all this kind of wild surf, and if you're a keen surfer, you won't be disappointed. But we also have this really beautiful protected bay. So it's a pretty kind of special area and a big tourist attraction. In terms of the two vineyards and the soils, we are mostly talking about sort of lateritic soils over granite. The soils are quite ancient and depleted, so they're not kind of really rich nutritionally, and so it means we don't have over-the-top vine growth. So it really comes down to how you manage the kind of mulch layer, the topsoil layer, viticulturally what you're applying in the vineyard, things like irrigation, and you can really control how the vines grow. So we don't want to have, huge, big, aggressive vines producing big crops. We can sort of maintain desirable crop levels and really keep flavour intensity. So I think that's really important. So, for me, I'm just a sucker for anywhere I see gravel. And the region is, has a lot of these, beautiful gravelly loam soils that we refer to as forest grove soils, and they are just just beautiful for growing grapes, and strike a really lovely balance for the vines. Not so struggling that they don't bear fruit and the vines defoliate, but they're also not really big and aggressive and overproducing. So it's pretty special soil wise.
Very cool. And what about a kind of maybe a slightly deeper dive as to within those vineyard sites? Then, where have you discovered, and what's the latest, most up to date thinking on the the best sites, dependent on grape variety? Dependent on, I guess, whether it's maybe something more classic for the region, or some of those alternative varietals.
Yeah, I think it's just really early days now to be able to kind of talk with any kind of confidence. I mean, I think varieties like Chardonnay, Cabernet, which are so well understood in the region, yes, for sure. For me personally, the south of Margaret River is just, shining with Chardonnay. I mean, it's such a it's just that much cooler, and the Chardonnay responds to that so well, and particularly the Gingin clone that sort of predominates throughout the region. Whereas, perhaps further north you might go for Cabernet, but it sort of depends on the season. You can make great wine whether you're talking about the north or the south for Chardonnay, for Cabernet. But it just depends on the season. Extremes of seasons kind of can impact the region, and the middle is probably a little bit more consistent. But there's no doubt you can make outstanding wine throughout the whole region, but stylistically different. And I'm fine with that. I think differences to be kind of applauded. That's what keeps it interesting. The alternative varieties. The ones that we've planted in Carrydale, I would say some of them, we kind of feel like they, haven't lived up to expectation, but a whole lot have, So we're like massive fans of Sangiovese and Nebbiolo down in the south of Margaret River. We even grow a bit of Pinot down there, which is just a bit fun because who doesn't want to kind of at least try and make a Burgundy? I mean, failure is always probably likely, but, you at least want to have a go. So, yeah, we're pretty happy with a whole lot of varietals down there that we continue to champion. One that maybe you perhaps wouldn't have even thought of is like Grenache. I mean, God, we love it. It's fantastic for rosé, makes most beautiful, pretty varietal, sort of medium-bodied red, and then you can boost it up with a bit of Shiraz and a bit of Mourvedre for making more classic GSM. But there's a lot still to understand, but it's exciting times.
Yeah, it really sounds it, and I think another way I'd like to understand a bit better, and it's interesting, Mark. You mentioned it a couple of times already now, the difference between the north and the south. And I'm just curious. How would you kind of to me, I'm a real Margaret River newbie. How would you kind of characterize those differences and potentially any similarities? What are we kind of talking about here? And kind of introduce me to that north-south divide in the way that makes most sense.
Well, probably if you take something like Chardonnay, for example, because obviously it's varietally dependent. For me, kind of northern Chardonnay, kind of middle Chardonnay is kind of a little more front palate. It's quite rich. It tends to be sort of in a ripe peach spectrum. I've had a few non-Margaret River winemakers accuse it of being tin pineapple. I don't think that's true, but I just think it's mostly Eastern States winemakers a bit jealous of what we can do. But when you get down to the south, it's got much more sort of white peach, pear. It's kind of more linear. It's kind of more mineral. It's more chalky. So for me, that southern fruit has this kind of, nice character. It's not all on the front palate and just persists through the wine. So that's what I love about it. That's what, a big fan. And as I say, the main clone that we have in Margaret River responds really well down there. If you're taking something like Cabernet, in the north, it's kind of more, in my mind, more blue fruit. In the middle, it's more kind of red fruit cassis. And then when you get to the south, to me, it becomes more like classic Cabernet. It's more about structure. So it's about tannin and persistence. There's kind of a little savoury thread to it. So it's not all kind of, fruity and juicy. It's about structure and ageability, those wines for the long haul. So for me, you get these really different expressions. All lovely. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy to drink a good version of all of them. But if you've been put a bottle of wine in front of you and you were said, "Well, where are you going to pick it? North, middle, south?" That's kind of how I'd see them. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it, and it's again, I think it's that conversation for me about regional differences and regional nuance. I think it's of course for communication. You tell the Margaret River story, and you let people know where it is on the map, and let them discover that. But then I think for the ones that want it, they'll want to explore sub-regionality, differences, different impacts and different effects. And just maybe to kind of close off that conversation, does that mean then that that's kind of opening up kind of the palette that's available to a lot of the winemakers there in terms of maybe blending from those different zones and maybe making something that's different from either one of those by itself?
Yeah. Look, I definitely think, if you take Cabernet, those differences across the region actually blend really nicely, and can make something that's quite interesting by itself as a blend, whole of Margaret River expression, if you like. But then, there's also that idea that I want to champion north, south, an individual vineyard, so none of them are right or wrong. It's just make a good wine and tell a good story, and I can drink the wine and buy into it, however you do it.
Where that very naturally takes us is to get an insight, get a peek into the cellar over there, and just to, I guess, understand a bit more about what goes on from a winemaking perspective. I mean, I'm really fascinated. You've already mentioned Earl's background as a potter, and the sort of amphora-led projects, but I guess that's only one production kind of avenue among many. So give us a sense of what happens to that fruit once it gets into the cellar.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing about Earl, he's a deep thinker. He reads a lot, researches a lot, and I think that's kind of been part of what he and I are a good fit. I've got a pretty strong background from my first degree, and I taught at the university wine science as well for 13 years. So it's like I'm a super geek, and so we like those kind of really scientific, geeky kind of conversations, and to try and work out ways that things are possible. And so one of the things, for example, that we do that's really unusual, to most wineries, we make a range of preservative-free wines. So we make them with no sulfur oxide at all in the winemaking. And that's a kind of specialised market, and it's actually a really decent size production for us. But I guess for me, the critical thing about making that wine has been the lessons that we've learned along the way. So making those wines and the techniques that we have employed to get the best result possible under a no sulfur oxide regime means that we've been able to apply a philosophy of minimal SO2 use in wine. So we kind of aim to get the sort of maximum effect in terms of sulfur oxide activity, but we want to get that at a significantly reduced amount of sulfur oxide use. And that's definitely kind of a philosophy that comes into how we make wine. And as I say, there's lots of different techniques that we use, and some of them are not unique to us, but we have a whole range that are. We use oxygen meters, for example, to measure the space the wine actually comes into contact with. So a lot of wineries will measure what's called the dissolved oxygen, the DO, the oxygen that's in the wine. When you do that, it's already dissolved in the wine. So we actually spend a lot of time measuring the oxygen in that gas space above the wine to make sure it doesn't dissolve in the wine. We have our tanks actually all hooked up so we can actually remove all oxygen from the tank. We then actually hook it up to an inert gas under a positive pressure, so there's no way oxygen can get into the tank. And so, these are the kind of things we learnt with preservative-free wines, and they kind of apply to sort of all of our other winemaking. So, a lot of testing and measuring and making sure oxygen stays away from the wine, and that means we need to rely less on sulfur oxide. So, that's definitely something that is a philosophy throughout. It's actually quite interesting. The system that we've sort of developed even allows us to harvest the carbon dioxide produced during fermentation, and we can actually use that around the winery for inerting other tanks. So we're not actually, purchasing carbon dioxide. We're actually harvesting our own. So we do that quite a lot as well. I guess we also do a lot of nutritional analysis as well. So we're really big on making sure we understand what's important for fermentation and make sure that the yeast has, everything it needs to conduct a really good fermentation and ferment all the sugar out of the wine. So from where we sit, if we remove all of the sugar, we really take away one of the significant substrates that other spoilage things can live off and potentially spoil the wine. So, again, those kind of things mean that we can get away with lower levels of sulfur oxide. But, it just takes a lot of sort of understanding and measurements, doing all the analysis that you need. We also kind of favour higher pHs and lower acidities. That's the sort of style that we like to drink. So that's definitely part of the Happs style. And if you talk to winemakers about, the idea of using low sulfur oxide levels and high pH levels, that most of them probably be terrified. But, for us, if we, dot I's and cross T's on all those other things, then, we know we can actually make those wines in that style that we want to drink. So, those things are really important to the style, the Happs style. But, mostly it's just really about, especially with 45 wines in the portfolio, making sure that we have a broad range of styles and not having lots of different wines that kind of fall in the same niche. So, we like those, light, crisp, delicate whites. We like those big, full, rich, complex whites. We like, a red that you can pop in the fridge and chill if you need to, something that's medium bodied for, some lighter fare, and then, that big hearty red when you're in winter. So we sort of have all of that. We have fortified wines that we love making, big fan of vintage port. So it's kind of, we have Touriga, so we can sort of make, something that's inspired by vintage port. We're big on dessert, sweet wines as well. So we have a strong following for sweeter wines. And, as I say, we're trying to have a wine for everybody and every occasion. And that's kind of how we see it.
A massive thanks to today's guest, Mark Warren of Happs Winery. Do be sure to visit happs.com.au, where you can learn more about the project, the team, and find their main social media handles. Please help to amplify this episode and the whole series by sharing the direct link, which is interpretingwine.com/504. Links to all episodes from the series are below in the description. I'd of course love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, and at Wine Podcast on Twitter. That does unfortunately bring the Margaret River Winemaker series to a close for now. All that's left to say is a huge thank you to all 4 series guests. It was great meeting you virtually, and hopefully I'll get to meet you in person sooner rather than later. I'm always on the lookout for the next region that you think I should be covering. My inbox is always open to suggestions at hello@interpretingwine.com. And don't forget, make sure you're subscribed to be alerted when the next series goes live. See you soon.